Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for signing up for this webinar. This afternoon, in the next 30 minutes or so, I'll talk about applying data analytics in digital course design. This work is based also on some joint projects that I've done with my colleagues, Jess Tan, also from BIMA SUSS. In this slide here, you notice that I've got two photos, one on the top left side, the other one on the bottom right side. Now, the contrast in these two photos are quite obvious in the sense that if you look at the top left, we're talking about conventional classes, about face-to-face physical classes. And right at the bottom on the right side, what we have is online class, a virtual session, a digital course. Now you notice that for centuries, the teaching and learning space is a physical space. Teachers and students come together in a physical class. Teachers teach, students learn, and that's the way it has been for centuries. And because of some advances in technology and pedagogy, and from factors in the supply and demand side, you find that in the last 2 decades, we have slowly moved towards digital courses. We have moved from face-to-face to blended to full online virtual classes. And this is what we have at the bottom right-hand side. The movement from conventional courses to digital courses is like a slow train in the last 2 decades or so. And we can explain this move from conventional to digital courses by looking at factors from the supply and the demand side. On the supply side, we have advances in technology. Advances in technology has made it possible for us to put materials online, readings online, lectures online, and for us to do teaching online and to have interaction online. So this is the supply side. And the advances also in pedagogy, which help us understand how we can make learning better online. The end result is this. With advances in technology and pedagogy, with the move from conventional to digital courses, we have extended our reach and access. We have now provided opportunities to learn anytime, anywhere. The move towards online classes is not just a supply thing, it's also a demand thing with demand factors. When we think about students, we used to think about fresh school leavers who come to universities to take courses in the class in a full-time mode. But nowadays, that has changed drastically. Many of the students that we have today are working adults in mid-career who realize that they need to upgrade themselves. And we also have a lot of lifelong learners coming to learn from universities and in universities. For many of these working adults, it's not feasible to come to class in the physical sense, but they certainly want to learn and they can learn online. So you notice that with the merging of supply and demand factors, there's now this trend towards conventional courses to digital courses, from face-to-face teaching and learning to online teaching and learning. And you have noticed in the center of this slide, I've drawn a bullet train. The bullet train is the event of COVID-19. COVID-19 came at the end of 2019, and it has changed the landscape drastically for universities and higher education. Because of COVID-19, last year, universities have closed not in the sense of going out of business, but closed in the sense of moving their physical classes to online classes. And that is what was feasible last year, and is what is feasible this year as well. So there's this movement towards online learning and virtual classes. So we have no choice now. We are now teaching online. So is there a difference? Are there consequences when we compare conventional courses to digital courses? Well, yes and no. If you look at the slides here, we can make comparisons of physical classes and online classes We'll notice that for both kinds of classes, there can be teaching and learning, whether physical or virtual. There can be in-class activities. But the main difference and the main perception or complaint seems to center around learner or student engagement. When we're in a physical class, as an instructor, I can look at the facial expressions of my student. I can look at their body language. I can see whether or not they understand what I'm saying and whether it's necessary for me to repeat certain points. In other words, I can observe their engagement and adjust my learning accordingly. If you have a virtual class, one common perception is that it's very difficult to observe learner engagement or student engagement because all my students are behind their screens and I actually do not know what they are doing. And that is true. A student can be staring at the camera in the laptop and yet be reading emails or playing computer games. So how do we observe student engagement? How do we assess student engagement? Well, a more fundamental question is, why are we interested in learner engagement or student engagement? We're interested in learner engagement because past studies have shown very convincingly that learner engagement is significantly associated with learning and performance, with the completion of program and with course satisfaction. We want our students to learn well, we want them to perform well, we want them to graduate, we want them to be satisfied with the course that they're taking, with the program that they're graduating from. So one very important aspect that influences all these is learner engagement. So when you look at the differences between physical classes and online classes, we have this perception that when we have online learning and digital courses, we cannot really observe and assess engagement, and much less maybe to influence engagement so that we can deliver positive outcomes. Now this view and this perception is right, but it's not complete. Now why is this not complete? When we talk about engagement just now, in the sense of observing students in class, observing students in the learning, we are referring mainly to in-class engagement. And the question which I have is this, which is, how about out-of-class engagement? Is out-of-class engagement even more important? Now, let's look at a physical class. Your students come to class, you observe them in class. But can you observe the students after they've left their physical classes? Do you know what they do for the remaining time they're not in class? Do they read the readings you have assigned to them? Do they do the discussion among themselves before they do the assessments? We cannot observe them when they go out of class. And out of class is actually a bigger part of a course. If you consider how much time students spend in class and how much time students spend out of class. My argument is this. My argument is that while it's true that it's difficult to observe in-class engagement for digital courses is what can provide us with a good view of out-of-class engagement, and out-of-class engagement is actually more important. How can we observe out-of-class engagement? Well, we have got components in the course. We have, let's say, lecture recordings. We have readings that were assigned to students that we put online. We have formative quizzes that students can take. We have projects for them to do. We have discussion for them to participate in, and so on. So when we have all these online activities for students and online interactions in digital courses, when students assess any of this online, they leave behind what we call data trail or data exhaust. Nowadays, we have learning management system. when we put things online, and when students assess what we put online, they leave a trail, they leave data. And because out-of-class engagement generate a lot of this data, we can actually measure and observe engagement out of class for digital courses. And this is what is very important. So when we observe out-of-class engagement, we are still concerned about engagement as a whole for the course, because engagement is very much associated with learning, with performance, with course completion and attrition, and with also course satisfaction. And this brings us to the topic of today, which is digital course design. If engagement is so important, then we want to design our courses such that our courses can encourage, can promote learner engagement so that the good outcomes can be achieved. How can we design courses to achieve that? Well, what is course design? So I've searched the internet. I've come up with a very simple definition here from the first source that I found on the internet. So let me just read it to you. Now, essentially, when we're talking about a course design, we're talking about the exposure of students to instructional materials, learning activities, and interactions. So essentially, we're talking about the gray box you see on this slide. We can put a lot of learning materials, a lot of interactions, a lot of activities online, lecture recordings, readings, formative quizzes, projects, assessment, games, and others. When we bundle all this together, we create a particular course design. And the topic today is, can we actually apply data analytics to help us with digital course design, so that when we design our online courses and virtual classes, we can encourage, we can promote, we can maximize engagement of the learners to help us maximize course satisfaction, performance and learning, and course graduation. So I summarize all this in this slide here. When we talk about data analytics in this context, we're referring very much to learning analytics. Well, one way to define learning analytics is to think of learning analytics as the application of data mining in a learning context. The application of data mining in the learning context. For data mining to be possible, there must be data. Because if there's no data, there's no mining in data mining, right? In learning analytics. And I mentioned just now that we can actually observe learner engagement. Because when learners assess the LMS, when they go online to read, to take part in activities, to interact with other students or the instructor, they leave behind data. And data will remain as raw data until they can be transformed into information to help us with our decision making. In this context, we're talking about how to design a course. So can we make use of data to help us design a course? And in this case, I'm focusing on learner engagement. We want to design courses that can help us encourage, promote, and maximize learner engagement. So let me move on now to give an illustration on how that can be done. Now, by the way we define a course design just now, we're thinking of a course design as a bundle of components. What are these components? These components are all those that we saw in the gray box just now. So if I go back to the gray box, you see in the gray box that there are instructional materials, there are activities, there are interactions that we can create in a course. And when we bundle the different ways we put all these elements together, we have a particular course design. So if we apply learning analytics to help us with digital course design, then we're talking about this. This diagram here shows the different feasible ways that we can bundle instructional materials, activities, and instructions to create particular course design. So in this example here, I've got 4 different bundles of components that I call A, B, C, D, and each of these will represent a particular course design for an online course or a digital course. It can be, for example, that in bundle A, I put a lot of emphasis on online discussion. I put a lot of emphasis on interactions among students. It can be that in the second bundle, I put a lot of emphasis in self-learning, in students watching lecture videos, in students looking at readings. And in the third bundle, it can be the case that I emphasize a lot on assessment. I make students go through formative and summative quizzes, do projects, and so on. So the point that I'm trying to illustrate is this, that when we talk about course design, we're talking about different bundles of components, and these components can be instructional materials, they can be interactions, they can be activities. Now, if we have in this example here 4 different course design, the different components and course design will generate a certain pattern of online engagement. Different instruction materials, different activities, different interactions will lead to a different pattern or different profile of online engagement behavior. So we know what kind of online engagement is generated by each of the different course design or the different course components. If we believe in a certain pattern that will help us maximize performance, and a certain pattern that will help us maximize course satisfaction, then the results from our learning analytics, from our data analytics, will enable us to define or to identify which bundle is most appropriate for the course that we're trying to present, the course that we're trying to develop. When it comes to online learning, engagement is only one of the important factors. It's not the only factor. The way that we conduct classes online, virtually, digitally, may depend on other factors. One factor, of course, would be the nature of the content that we're trying to teach our students. Just as a very simple example, there might be course content that are not so appropriate to be conducted online. Let's talk about the training of a surgeon. If you want to train a doctor to perform surgery, you'll be very concerned that this doctor is trained only online without any practice on real patients. You'll be very concerned. So in this case, I'm trying to illustrate that the content that we're trying to teach our students, in this case, teaching surgery to medical students, may not be a good thing to be done online. Maybe there should be a blended approach. Students can learn parts of the body online, but at some point, they must really see a body to perform surgery on that body, right? So this is what we mean by bundling of components and looking at what would be the result in terms of engagement in this case. And for us to assess the result to determine which bundle of components is what we want for this course. So this is what we mean by looking at data analytics to help us with digital course design. So let me now illustrate further by giving you a real example. And this is part of the work that I mentioned just now that I did with my colleague in BMA, Jess Tan. Now, I've got 2 panels here, one on the left and one on the right. The one on the left, now this is actually a marketing course, and the marketing course was conducted online, fully online. And the team of instructors and course designer came together to design that course. So you see on the left-hand side, certain components, certain assessment components, certain self-learning components, certain interactive components like discussions and so on. So there are a lot of components, a lot of instructional materials, activities, interactions bundled together to create this particular course design. Incidentally, when we presented this course, it's a marketing course online, we also have a parallel version presented to another group of students. That version is more in a blended mode with not as much online components, with a lot more face-to-face classes and some online learning and online activities and so on. So we actually have two different bundles that we offer simultaneously. Now, what we see on the right-hand side is the online engagement framework that Jess and myself developed in 2017, presented in 2018. Now, essentially, what we believe is this: online engagement, or more generally, learner engagement is important. We like to be able to measure learner engagement. We like to be able to influence learner engagement because we believe that the different levels of learner engagement can lead to different levels of performance, course completion, program completion, and also satisfaction. So we came up with this framework. Now, many things in this framework is not new, although we've come up with some new online engagement metrics. Essentially, we're looking at ways we can assess and measure engagement. And we want to apply this online. What we have done and what we have succeeded to do this year is to look at our LMS. Our LMS is Canvas. We use Canvas. And when students assess their materials or the activities or the interactions online, data is being generated. Now, in the LMS, we have millions and millions of records. So our colleagues from the learning system and applications side have managed to extract the raw data that are extremely massive, millions and millions of records. And Jess has looked at how to transform this raw data into transactions, and even then we end up with millions of transactions, and from the transactions, how to measure students' online engagement behavior or pattern for this marketing course. All right. Now with that, we did some data analytics. We did some learning analytics. So again, there are two panels here on this slide. Let me talk about the left-hand side first and then the right-hand side. We have got data. The data that we have extracted and generated and transformed and derived came from the marketing course for these two groups of students. One group which is totally online, that group is a blended version. And we look at the online engagement metrics. We did a lot of learning analytics. We actually used a decision tree, which is a very important and popular machine learning technique to try to identify the patterns of online engagement profile generated by these two different course design. So we shall not interpret the decision tree in great detail. Instead, I've summarized the findings on the right-hand side. So what we have is this: course design 1, course design 2. Now, course design 2 is actually the full online course. Course design 1 is the same course, but presented differently, with more blended components and more physical class components as well. And we found from the data generated from the LMS that the two different course design has led to two quite different online engagement profile. For example, for students who took the marketing course under course design 1, they make more consistent online access throughout the course. Whereby for students in the full online course, the access online is not as consistent because there's a higher concentration of access in the last quarter of the course. In addition, if you look at the total access time, online access time, course design 2 has an online engagement profile that's associated with, on average, longer total access time as compared to the case of course design 1. And not only that, students in course design 1 make online access less frequently. In other words, for the students under the full online course for marketing, they make very frequent access online. And the last finding that we have is that for the full online course, the students access more on the last quarter. So the period which they make online access is shorter than the access period for the blended course. Right? Now, so after deriving these findings, the question is not which is right and which is wrong. Rather, the question is, now we have got two different course design. We know from the data, and we know from the data mining of the data, what kind of online engagement behavior or profile is associated with the course design. So, if you are a course instructor, then you have to decide which online engagement profile is desired for your course. Do you want the profile that is associated with course design 1, or do you want the profile that's associated with course design 2? And when you make the decision, then it becomes clearer how you should bundle the components, how you should bundle or make decisions on the instructional materials, on the activities, on the interactions, so that when you present your course, there's a good chance that your course will promote, encourage, and lead to a certain behavior online that you believe is going to be helpful in getting the students to learn better, to perform better, to be more satisfied with the course, and to graduate eventually. This is just a very specific example looking at two course designs. If we look at the previous slide, this is a more general framework. Suppose now we're looking at how do we design a digital course. In particular, online courses are now very important. Digital courses are now very important. If nothing else, because of COVID-19, we do not actually have a choice. Universities have closed their physical classes, and we do not know for how long we have to have online courses in universities. And of course, we should bear in mind also the demand side and the supply side of this move from conventional courses to digital courses. Digital courses will be here. How do we best design it? And what do we mean by best design a digital course? In this seminar, I focus only on online engagement. There can be other factors that we look at. But suppose we just focus on online engagement because we believe that online engagement is associated with very important outcomes, then the way to go about it that involve data analytics will be this. Either from courses that you already have in the past, or for courses that you're going to design or going to experiment, you can always decide on a few bundles of components to represent different digital course designs. Then when the courses are presented, data will be generated in the learning management system. Analyze the data to see what kind of online engagement profile is associated with the different bundles of components. Then decide which is the online engagement profile that you desire for this particular course. Once you have decided on that, they will give you a pretty good idea on how you should design your digital course. Right? So that's where we are now. Now, let me make some concluding remarks, and then we have some time for Q&A. A few things for us to maybe be mindful of. The first is that online learning and digital courses are here to stay. Online learning and digital courses are here to stay. The learning space and the teaching space have already moved. It's no longer physical. is very much virtual and online today. So if we take this as a given, we want our students to do well. So how do we design our digital courses? How do we present our courses online? Well, of course, we can make decisions on course design based on experience, based on what we know or what we expect, or based on theory, based on pedagogy. But there's also an approach which is more data-driven and evidence-based. Can we actually look at data to help us decide what kind of course design will lead to what kind of learner engagement? And based on the learner engagement that we desire, how shall we design our digital courses? How do we present our courses online, virtually? So something to think about. And what I've shared over the last 20 minutes just now is just an example of what we have done in SUS to try to understand online engagement, to try to look at the antecedents and the consequence. And we are going very much into this very seriously this year, because it was only the beginning of this year that we have managed to implement our online engagement framework to be able to extract very raw data from the learning management system, to convert and transform the data into useful online engagement metrics that can use to study a lot of things, in particular centered around learner engagement. I mentioned about antecedents and consequence just now. The consequence part is quite established in prior studies. We have known the association, or we now know the very significant association between learner engagement and course outcomes like learning, performance, attrition, completion, satisfaction. So that part is quite well established. But now trying to understand the antecedents part. In other words, what are the factors associated with different levels, different patterns, different profiles of online engagement? Now, why is this important? This is important because if we can identify the significant antecedents, we would know how to influence online engagement or learner engagement in such a way to maximize useful outcomes for the students. And in this presentation, we're looking at course design as one of the important antecedents that we can use to influence learner engagement, especially for online courses. Well, there's still a limitation that my presentation focuses mainly around online engagement and using data analytics to guide us and to help us in course design. But when we design courses, there can be other factors that we should consider, such as the content of the material we're trying to teach the students. So we have to put all these things together so that at the end of the day, we hope that online learning, digital courses can be very useful to our learners. With online learning, we can extend our reach and make opportunities of learning available anytime, anywhere. And with good course design, we can maximize the outcomes for the students. And this is the situation that we're in today. We have no choice. With COVID-19, we have to make the best use of the opportunities that we have to adopt, to adapt, and to make it better for teaching and learning. Well, having said that, thank you very much. So I'm going to stop share. Let me see where I am. I'm going to stop share. Oh, I'm having some problems here. I'm not able to get it. Okay, I'm going to stop share and hand it back to Horace.
Thank you, Prof. Goh. Thank you for the very thorough and insightful presentation. I'm sure the attendees who are here with us this afternoon have had many great takeaways from this session when it comes to applying data analytics in their digital course design and can apply it at their respective institution, which is very timely, as mentioned, given the current landscape and situation. So now we have come to our question and answer session. So we have had a number of questions here that came in. I'll start with the first question with the most liked. So the question here, or rather a remark for us to discuss is, this person has faced issues on digital courses, even if they are using LMS. So they use Canvas. So the kind of the challenge here is that the student used to play the recordings and do other things to dodge digital traces. They even hire seniors or pay their peers to attend their LMS. For example, attending quiz, assignment, and anything that deals with online that can easily be circumvented in a physical class setting. So the question to you, Prof, would be any advice to instructors who are facing such challenges?
Yes, I think this is a very common problem. And in fact, when we have assignments online, it's also for students to employ ghostwriters, someone else to do the assignments and so on. So how do we detect all of this? And the question just have to do with activities, interactions. How do we make sure that students are actually there and doing the learning? Well, if we're talking about in-class activities, let me separate into in-class and out of class. Suppose in class, you ask students to do certain discussion and you're not sure whether they are actually discussing or reading or doing other things. Now, one so-called trick which is commonly used is to throw the questions back to the students in the in-class context. Suppose I now ask the question, okay, I'd like you all to discuss in your breakout rooms whether this theory applies in practice, or how do you apply this theory in practice. Now, let the students know that you'll be visiting the breakout rooms to look at them, and also let the students know that at the end of the breakout sessions, after the discussions during the online session, you will ask students to make a 1-minute presentation, and they will have to answer questions from either classmates or from you. Now, once you have activities structured in this way, there will actually be greater motivation for the students to be more engaged in class, to actually do the discussion, because they know that you'll be visiting them in the breakout rooms, and they will know that at the end of the discussion, they're supposed to make some presentation, and they're supposed to answer questions from the other students. So as not to embarrass themselves, I think they would feel comfortable to actually go through the exercise or the discussion. So this is for in class. Now, for out of class, suppose you tell the students, okay, I want you to read this article before you come to class next week. So how do you know that the students actually read the article and so on? Well, there are two things you can do. One way, of course, is to say that after reading the article, I want to make a 100-word summary and circulate to the whole class. And when you come to class, I will be asking selected questions to some students to elaborate on some of the things that they have read in the article. So I think it's very much a way of structuring the activities, the materials, the interactions in such a way that will push or that will nudge students to actually be engaged. So this is what I think may be something that you may like to think about.
Thank you, Prof. The next question here with the second most liked comes from an anonymous. So the question here is digital course design a replacement for teachers or force multiplier?
Is it a replacement for teachers?
So, is it a replacement for teachers or is it a force multiplier?
Okay, that means is course design a replacement for teacher? Is digital course? I think I don't quite get the content of the question. Can you repeat again? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. The question, I guess, in full is asking whether digital course design, firstly, is it a replacement for teacher, or is it, or rather, is it a force multiplier for educators? So, is it a replacement, or does it actually help as a force multiplier?
Okay, I do not think that digital courses can replace teachers. in fact, I would think that it would be the teachers behind the digital courses that will enable more learning to be done. So I would think that there will always be teachers in the background to look at what content to teach, how to best present the content, how to structure the activities, how to design the instructional materials, and so on. And once a course is well designed, and because it's a virtual course, it can be replicated and scale up to a much bigger audience. So I do not think that is a replacement for teachers, but it will in fact help education generally when you have good teachers in the background doing all the course design. I'm not sure whether I'm answering this question.
No, I think Prof. Ko, that's a very insightful advice to Anonymous. So I hope that answers the question that is put forth. The next question here would be from Ben Nazir. So Ben Nazir mentioned that he or she agrees with you that online learning and digital courses are here to stay. But the real question is, are we prepared to bypass proper student evaluation other than through the physical classroom? And I think he or she further added a supplement that he or she agrees with your bundling of components. So do you have any advice or remarks to this statement?
All right. The statement is, can we bypass student evaluation? Is that the question?
Correct.
Okay. I think that students can see through. In other words, when you have good online courses and students learn and they're satisfied with it, they will actually give you good ratings. So when we started our blended learning in SUSS, when we started the Go For Online, at the very beginning, there were a lot of hesitancy, a lot of unhappiness also, because instructors are not prepared for online learning, students are not prepared for online learning. Now for COVID-19, we are a bit fortunate because for a long time, SUSS is a university for working adults. In fact, even today, most of our students are working adults. So we have a heavy dosage of online learning already. So our instructors are more prepared, our students are more prepared. But at the very beginning, which is about maybe 7-8 years ago, when we started this journey of blended learning, we have got difficulties. And one of the greatest concern is, would students now give poorer ratings to instructors? Because in a face-to-face class, it's quite different from in the online class. And then we realized that students actually can see through, if they see the instructors putting a lot of effort to help them with the learning, to generate good learning materials for them, to have good activities for them so that they can interact and learn from each other, they will actually give good ratings. So I do not think at this point that virtual classes or online learning will equate to poorer student assessment. In fact, it could be the other way around. So let me also tell you what we have done in the past semester. Now, in the past semester, in fact, since the beginning of the year, we've been looking at the effects of COVID-19 on student performance. And you'll be quite surprised that when COVID-19 came and we put all the courses online, students' performance actually improved last semester and the semester before that in 2020. And of course, we are happy that the fact that we have put everything online did not make performance worse or student learning diminished. So that's a good point. And we're now going to study what is the effect on the student assessment of the instructors. And so far, there's nothing to indicate that ratings have gone down, eventually have gone down because of online learning. So far, the results have been quite encouraging. Of course, we have more to report when we finish the study.
Thanks, Prof. Ko. The next question here is from Muzi. So, is there any study to review what is the optimum range of numbers of students in an online or digital course?
Is there any study to look at
the optimum range of number of students in online or digital course? So is there a max or minimum suggested capacity for an online course?
Okay, now I think that there's some controversial answers here. So I give you both views. I think one view is that just like any class, there should be an optimal number, because it will be difficult to handle when you have a lot of students. So if you compare a physical class with a face-to-face class, in a physical class, you can observe the students, you can respond immediately. So if questions are asked, it's easy to respond. But in an online class, that's more difficult. Because if you give time for every student to ask a question, it would actually take a long time for it to go back and forth because it's not so convenient online as compared to physical classes. So yes, so some people are thinking about, yes, we shouldn't have a very big class. So maybe around 30 would be fine. In fact, we are also looking around the number of 30 in SUSS. We find that 30 is a manageable number, it's a good number to give sufficient time for students and instructors. But I wouldn't thought of 30 as the magical number. Now, there is also an opposing view, which is this, which is to say that when things are moved online, it's no longer one-to-many, it's now one-to-one. Meaning that when things are online, if you watch me talking now, I believe that about 400 of you out there, I cannot see on my screen, but I believe that more than 400, maybe close to 500 have registered. And let's assume that 400 of you out there, you'll notice that every one of you is looking at me as though I'm in front talking with you. So if you take this perspective, then what it means is that essentially there's no, in a way, no maximum limit. You can have 400 persons out there and the interaction can be as personal. You're looking at me, and of course I can choose to look at you if that technology allows that. So there is actually the advantage of online learning. It's very scalable. Not only is it scalable, you notice that it can be done anytime, anywhere. For example, after this session, a recording is done, and you can come back to watch the recording anytime you want. So if you miss certain things in the actual live webinar, you can always visit it again. And because we're in the virtual space, you can also ask your questions after the class. Compare this with your physical class. For years, for decades, I've taught in physical classes. So what do? Sometimes before the class, we go to class earlier, let the students ask some questions, we end the class slightly later, and then students can ask questions, and we have consultation hours. That means we put outside our office door, you can come and visit me, let's say 4 hours a week. These are the times I will be in the office, you can come and ask me questions. But if things are moved online, you'll notice that students can post their questions anytime, not only to me, but to the whole class. And other classmates can also respond to the students' question. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for online learning, a lot of opportunities for digital courses, a lot of opportunities for teaching and learning that you cannot find in physical classes. So if you ask me if there is an optimal size, I would think that it's a function very much of how you want to conduct the class, how you organize your instructional materials, how you organize the activities, how you organize the interactions. That's what
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. So I think we still have time for maybe about 2 questions. There are a number of questions being sent in so far. I'll try to make sure that we can answer them all, but with time restriction, we will have to choose those with the most likes. So the next question here would be, what advice can you provide to educators who want to design digital course or online learning, online facilitation? What are the online facilitation skills and instructional design knowledge to provide these educators that you can give so that they can get started right after this session?
Okay, all right. I'm not sure whether I will surprise you with my answer, but I think the most important for someone wanting to design a digital course is for this person to go through a digital course himself or herself. In fact, that's what we impose on our faculty in SUSS. We started our journey about 7-8 years ago, and at some point we say that every faculty member must go through an online course. And this would be my first suggestion. If you want to design an online course, go through an online course yourself. Then you will understand what works, what does not work, what is good, what is not good, what helps learning, what does not, and so on, right? Now, having said that, I should say that there are some ground principles for good course design. And there are a lot of materials out on the internet, a lot of courses you can take also. to see how you can design a good course or have a good course design. For example, everyone will tell you, before you design a course, you must know what is the objective of the course. What's the content you're trying to teach? Why are you trying to teach this content? What is the objective you're trying to achieve? So if we don't lay down the very basic fundamental principles for the course, no design would be helpful. You must know the objective of the course, the content, the nature of the content, the materials, the profile of your students, and so on. So after having a very good understanding of the course you're trying to design or present, after having a good understanding of the profile of the students, then you ask yourself, how can you promote learning of this content, of these objectives for this profile of students? So there is no, I think, no fixed way of doing it. Essentially, it's a lot of imagine yourself in the student's shoe and also expose yourself to different course design, to different ways you can structure activities, and then piece them together. And I think there's also a fair amount of try and error. So talk to your colleagues, expose certain ideas to certain students, look at the feedback, and it will take a while before you reach the idea. And that's what we do all the time in universities as well. When we start the course the first time, we will never know whether it will be the best, and usually it will not be the best. And we make improvements along the way. We can learn from others. And if you look at the data analytics approach that I mentioned just now, if we have done our learning analytics and data analytics, we would know already from past experience what kind of course design will lead to what kind of online engagement profile or behavior. So what is it that you want for your course? So that will give some idea as to what components will be useful, what components will not be useful. It's a lot of try and error, it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of conceptualizing. And unfortunately, we cannot escape from all of this hard work that we need to do to design a very good course.
Thank you, Prof. Ko. I think we have time for one last question, and I think this question would be timely for people here who would like to learn more from you, even after today's session. So the question would be, what kind of techniques do you use for your data analytics? Could you share your journals or papers regarding this topic and how one may assess them?
Yes, certainly. So I belong to the unit that's called Business Intelligence Analytics. So we'll be most happy to share what we do. In fact, we do a lot of things like early alert system, student advisories, looking at cost equity, looking at different aspects of student data, looking at the effects of COVID-19 and all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested to find out more of what we do, of course now you can't visit us because of COVID-19. We'll be happy to share what we do in BNA. Maybe we can connect with your institution and give an online seminar, or through Wiley we can also have another seminar just to focus on learning analytics. And we can also make our papers available. And maybe one very good repository is Escalite 2019. Escalite is a conference is a learning conference, and it was held in SUSS in 2019. And so in there, I have me and my colleagues have presented a lot of papers that we can circulate. It's not a problem, but I think there's also a video. I think it's a 40-minute video. It's actually a keynote address that I have delivered in Escalite 2019 that gives a very good view, or in my opinion, I'm not too arrogant saying that, it gives a very good view of what learning analytics is all about and what do we do in SUSS in VIA. Maybe after this, what I can do is let me forward this video to Horace. There's a link, it's a YouTube link. And then if there's anything after that, you're most welcome to contact me if you have questions or if you need clarifications, or if you look for some information or resources, or if you'd like us to present further seminars to help you look into what we do. Any of this is most welcome. And you can also email to me. we are all in the education industry. We're all in this together. We actually like to help our learners. So you're most welcome. I will send some materials, and you're most welcome to contact me as well.
Thank you, Prof. Koh. And I'll be sure to share the materials that was mentioned as well in the follow-up email to the attendees as well, so that you guys can have access to the resources that were shared by Prof. Koh. So we have come to near the end of the webinar today, but we will really appreciate if you could take a moment to fill out our 2-minute survey using the link or by scanning the QR code on the screen right now. You will immediately have access to the slide handouts upon the completion of this survey. So please also look out for our follow-up email, as mentioned, that will alert you on the on-demand recording of today's webinar, as well as the resources that will be shared by Prof. Koh. So on behalf of Wiley Education Asia, I would like to thank Prof. Koh for the insightful session and sharing, and for everyone for taking the time to join us in this afternoon session. So thank you. We hope to see you in future sessions. Stay safe, stay well, and have a great evening ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Right. Bye for now. Thank you. Take care.